the car market is going to crash. I don't think that this is any secret to anybody, but I've been digging through more and more data and information and listening to more and more people, and I think all signs lead to something is going to give, and the US government is likely going to step in some way to help fix the situation. Whatever you want to call it, they're gonna try to help or fix the situation. It likely won't work. It likely will make things worse. Like we saw in 2008, they'll try maybe a cash for clunkers situation. They'll try, bailouts. They'll try maybe giving subsidies or low interest loans to the buyer or the seller, get some subsidies, something along those lines. That will likely happen. But right now we are looking at massive inventories across the board. All of the automotive manufacturers are just filling up a reserve in a way. But the problem is with vehicles, the reserve isn't something that needs to be built up. Cars can be built very quickly and, they get outdated very quickly. So some of these manufacturers with 22 vehicles, 23 vehicles that are brand new, unregistered, those are vehicles that are less desirable. So there is a inherent, loss on all of those, even though they're still brand new. People don't want that. So they're now sitting on all these 2024s, and if nobody buys those, then those 2023s are just going to become more and more in this mystery zone of what do you do with them, because they've never been purchased, so they've never had any bank note on them or anything, so they're still technically worth the same price that the dealership bought them for. But the problem is there's no buyer for them. People want the next best thing. They don't want a 2-year-old new car. And no buyer should want that. If you're buying a brand new car, you should want it of the model year. Because if you buy a brand new car that's already old, when you go to sell it, it is just older. And it doesn't matter that it was new when you bought it. It was new old stock. It doesn't matter. It's an older car now. So don't buy one of those old cars for the same price as a new one. There's inventory all over. And we're going to talk about it because there's a lot of inventory. So I got a list of all of the big three. Their truck inventory is absolutely insane. If you have a dealership, I'd love to hear from you because this stuff is crazy to me that there's this many vehicles sitting on lots. And normally when there's vehicles sitting on lots, that's actually not a huge problem because, their dealerships are taking in vehicles on trade-in. They're selling new vehicles to that person, and then they're selling the old vehicle as well. But because the interest rates are going up, because the average car that people own age is going up, people aren't trading in their new cars, people aren't buying new cars, that means everything kind of comes to a halt. So dealerships don't want to take your trade-in quite the same anymore. So dealerships are trying to offload stuff. They don't care about your trade-in. If any of this is making sense, I don't know if you guys are following, but it's basically at a standstill. They don't want to take your car. You need to trade it in. Facebook Marketplace, you may put it up there and sell it, but it's probably not going to move either. So everybody's kind of at this halting situation, and I think it's just the longer it halts, the more vehicles just flood into the market brand new. And then there's also a other issue of people just pulling up to dealerships and saying, here's my vehicle, and they're just doing voluntary repossessions. Those are on the rise. It's a mess. And I think that we're just getting into it. The bubble is still growing. It has not burst yet. And I think that there's a few things that are going to happen. I could put on my tinfoil hat for this one. I believe one of the things we're going to see is a union strike across the board. I think Ford needs one. I think Chevy needs one. Dodge definitely needs one. I think we're going to see a union strike. And I think the union strike's not going to be by accident. I think that there's going to be higher powers in the union heads' ears saying, hey, we could really use a strike for a few months. We got a bunch of inventory. We need to move it. They had the same issues in 2020, but the problem was it was a natural strike in a way. It just, people were laid off. But they're going to fall into that same situation where they need to slow down production somehow so that some of this inventory can funnel out into the world and they could get some of that sweet 8% interest back from some of those vehicles. We'll see. I don't know. Do you guys agree? Maybe they'll just do layoffs and shut the factories down, but I think they'd rather save face with a union strike and have, all these people not laid off, but just, parked in a way. And then when they finally bring them all back and they're like, we're going to give you 50 cents extra an hour and, we're going to don't clock out on lunch or whatever stupid thing they're going to offer. They're going to look so good. The union won. The union head looks good. The CEO of Ford looks good. Everybody looks good in that situation. Layoffs, nobody looks good. Everybody's angry. So I think we might see something like that. Cash for clunkers might appear again. It was a tragedy, and everybody that is in the know on cash for clunkers knows that was a huge tragedy. The Obama administration did that. They took so many vehicles off the streets that were good vehicles, and now everybody ends up having to get something new. So, there's a whole rabbit hole to go down on cash for clunkers. I could go on for hours about that, but it was sad. A lot of classic good vehicles got taken off the road. I think that's one route that we could see happen here. But then there's another one that I think would be even more interesting and even more tinfoil hat needed. I think the OEMs and the federal government may get with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and say, hey, how do we get some of these old cars off the roads and force people to buy new cars? And who has the power to stop an old car from being able to be used for commuting to work and back? The EPA. They can go to some of these states that have more power and, they can bump up some of those regulations and make it a lot more difficult to get your fresh car registered. And suddenly, boom, you're pinned into a corner and you have to go buy a new car. So there's a strong chance that we may see something like that. I think that might be one of the more likely case scenarios to, stimulate some of this, and maybe they'll even work with Cash for Clunkers on that because it kind of works well together where you're forcing people to get those bad vehicles off the streets, and then you also have an outlet for them, and then you can give them a coupon. I think some of that stuff may work together, and then, you force people into this perpetual debt snowball where they now have a $700 a month car note. I was going to say mortgage because some of these car notes do sound like mortgages now. But I think some of that stuff may end up coming to fruition in the next, 8 to 10 months-ish, maybe year and a half. I don't know. November is going to be pretty crazy because, an election year, who knows what's going to happen. But I think a lot of that might happen. National debt, like not our country debt, but like single person debt is at an all-time high. Car prices are at an all-time high, and car loans are at an all-time high, and repossessions are creeping up. So something has to give, and I know somebody somewhere is working on this right now. Somebody in the Pentagon or somebody in a dark, no windows room at the White House is crunching numbers, probably thinking, how can we force these Americans to buy new vehicles? They need to consume more vehicles because these big three manufacturers need them to buy something new. And you don't have to. You can hold your ground, hold the line, and stick with your same vehicle you have now. You don't have to get into more debt just because your neighbor has a nice car. You don't need it. You don't need a nicer car. You don't need a big loan on a car. It doesn't feel any better after about, one payment. You're kind of like, oh, this was dumb. And then you're going to be upside down because the amount of vehicles coming into the market is going to force you to be upside down sooner than you ever would have imagined, especially in 2020 when people thought buying a new car was an investment that was going to go up in value. It is not going to be like that. These are going to drop like rocks. And suddenly a car with 50 miles and a car with 0 miles are going to have a huge difference in price just because there's so many on the market. So be careful. Don't get into a big situation like that. Don't spend a bunch of money on a new car. You don't need it. You'll be fine with the car you have. I think that's a problem we're going to see here very soon. I think the EPA guess may be stronger than I thought. The union strike one may sound a little conspiracy to you guys, but I think we might see that as well. Maybe layoffs. I think Dodge might just completely, fold up and be done. I think they're going to have way too many Dodge 1500s on the market. None of these cars can really do any major changes to these because, you can't make a new vehicle you can't make a new Silverado and make the old one so obsolete that now nobody wants that thing. You have to try to incentivize people to buy the ones that are already made, and making a new one just de-incentivizes that. So they're in a tough spot. I know, you can hear plenty of talks from Jim Farley, not Chris Farley, Jim Farley, CEO of Ford. He talks about, some of the stuff that they've fought with and chip shortages and stuff like that. And now that they have them, people actually don't want the cars. They're showing that. So let's talk about some numbers here. So let's talk about the big three. I only got the big three trucks. Tundra obviously exists, but, let's talk about the F-150, the Silverado, and the Dodge. So there's 77,000 F-150s, 78,000 Silverados, and 63,000 Dodges. Just the 1500s sitting on lots right now in the U.S. Just sitting there. And then if you go down to ones that have been sitting there for 90 days, there are 15,000 F-150s, 26,000 Silverados, and 17,000 Dodges that have all been sitting on the lots for over 90 days. I know if you drive past dealerships every day, you're probably noticing this. They're sitting around. They're not moving. Half of that's the interest rate. Half of that's just, people can't afford these. Like a truck, like some of these trucks are $1,000 a month. People aren't buying that. So these numbers show that, in my opinion. I haven't been following this my whole life, but looking at these numbers, that's a lot of vehicles. And then if you look at the total of big three, Ford has 385,000 new vehicles sitting on lots right now, not in transit, sitting on a dealership lot somewhere in the U.S. right now. And then 114,000 of them are sitting there for over 90 days. And then there's 32,000 Lincolns. So Ford has a good, healthy amount of inventory. It might take them a while to sell through this. It might not. That might be very quick, but I really don't think that's a quick sell. That's a lot of vehicles to move. And not to mention they're probably taking in a vehicle every time they sell one. So it really just kind of washes itself. Then Dodge has 55,000 Dodges, and Jeep has 180,000 Jeeps, and Ram has 127,000 Rams, and Chrysler's got 13,000 Chryslers. So, Fiat, Jeep, Stellantis has a lot of vehicles as well. There's 70,000 Jeeps that have been sitting on the lot for over 90 days. 70,000 Jeeps. So like Cherokees, Grand Wagoneers, Wranglers, they are loaded up with Jeeps right now. 180,000 Jeeps. So I don't know how this is going to go. You know what I mean? Like Chevy, you can keep going down the line. Chevy has 217,000 vehicles. 57,000 of them have been sitting on the lot for over 90 days. GMC has 100,000, 24,000 on the lot for over 90 days, and then Cadillac has 32,000. So Chevy, same deal, very flush with inventory. They are loaded up with inventory. And then if you go specific to like some EV stuff, the Mach-E, there's 13,000 of them on lots right now, 7,000 of them for over 90 days. The Lightning, 5,800 of them on lots right now, and then 4,200 of them have been there for over 90 days. So a huge percentage of the Lightnings have just been sitting. Like that's a huge percent of the total inventory have sat unmoved. I don't know if they're like, I don't know what's keeping these from moving. I can make my guesses. None of them are very nice, but I don't know, what they plan to do with that, because that's a lot of vehicles. There are $90,000 vehicles and they have thousands of them. Ford originally planned to make 3,200 per week, but the purchase numbers and how many they're selling a year does not translate to that being reasonable. So Ford is probably going to, bring that down to like 5 a week. They've already cut it in half to 1,600 a week, and they just don't, they're just not selling the way that they originally thought. And I think that they know that there's so many problems. And it's one of those deals where they may have a new one ready to unveil, but you got to sell some of that old inventory before you unveil the new one, or else all of these dealerships that are left with these trucks are left holding a bag now that Ford basically forced into their hand. What do you do if the manufacturer that's on your sign at your dealership left you holding the bag for all of these vehicles that you purchased from them, and then they just said, sorry, they're actually not that good. We came out with a new one. Now what? Now are those dealerships gonna want a old Lightning on trade and then sell that same customer the new one? How does that work? Even if you look at some of the other cars. So these are cars with over 100,000 vehicles on lots in the US right now. Nissan, Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, and Mazda all have over 100,000 vehicles sitting in inventories right now. That's like the whole automotive world has hundreds of thousands of vehicles sitting in inventory right now, brand new, that are just depleting in value, depleting in desire of, wanting them. Like, people don't want those older cars anymore. There's newer stuff coming out. They're just depleting. They're getting, what do they call it? Lot rot. They're just rotting away. The tires are getting older. The batteries are getting older. The things are getting outdated on those. And something has to give. Like, how do you force 1 million plus people to buy these vehicles, because you need them to be on the roads? You can't just leave them sitting at dealerships. So we may see this for a while. I don't know what's going to happen, where things are going to give. I think we may see large amount of buying incentives come down from the government so that people can buy these vehicles. I really think the EPA might step in. I don't know. Some of you guys, I would love to hear from you. This is as of June 2024. And it's not looking that good. I mean, it's looking like we got a lot of vehicles. So hopefully something gives. I understand nobody wanting these vehicles. I don't know what percentage of these are over $50,000, but I would say probably like 80% of these are over $50,000 vehicles. The average income in the U.S. is like $40,000. So I can't understand how vehicle manufacturers thought that they could just keep making vehicles that are higher priced than 90% of America makes, and that just be that. Like that doesn't make any sense. There's no option here for a lot of people. So a lot of people are going to try to stick with their used cars for as long as possible. I think we're going to see a lot of cars get basically totaled out by lack of maintenance. So somebody's just going to run a car into the ground because they can't keep putting tires and oil changes and things like that, maintenance items on a credit card. They're going to run out of their credit limit on those, just keeping some of these used vehicles running. Some of you guys that have shops may have already seen some of this. People just unable to pay for their vehicles. I think people with a lot of cash are going to be able to scoop up some good deals on some of these used vehicles. If, if something you want, obviously there's going to be a boatload of just nothing vehicles, disposable things like the, Hyundais and stuff like that are just disposable cars, and Kias and things like that nobody's actually going to be looking for. So I think a lot of people are going to be in a weird spot in the next 8 to 10 months, I would say. I'm not, obviously this is not an original. I'm not the only one saying this. This isn't like, oh, I figured something out. This is just parroting a lot of the things that I see and hear. And I think it's going to be really tough in the car market. Some of you dealership guys I've talked to already, and they're talking about not selling inventory, and everybody in dealerships are trying to get out of dealerships. In Florida, we have insurance going up like crazy. So I don't know, guys. I know it's starting to ramble here, but we're gonna see some crazy things. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments what you guys think might come. What's gonna be the answer here? Because there's got to be an answer. You can't just take all the EVs and throw them in the ocean to feed the electric eels. Like, there's got to be some kind of answer here. Some higher power has to step in and try to help, or these cars or the dealerships are just going to fail. I don't know if it's going to go upstream, if the dealerships are going to take the brunt of this hit, or if it's going to trickle back to OEM. I don't really know fully the inner workings of some of these dealerships, how they get their line of credit from the OEMs, and some of these, almost all of these cars on dealers are usually loaned, like they have a loan on them, so they have to pay this back. So dealerships may start to see some more repossessions. Repossession companies are already seeing huge amounts of repossessions. It's not looking great, but I hate to be that doom and gloomer, the Chicken Little, but I just am talking about what I see. If you guys like this kind of stuff, I go down these rabbit holes every now and then, and I like to talk about this. If you want to see some more of my stuff, follow me on Facebook, Cooper Bogetti. I post a lot of this kind of stuff. If you want to hear some real anti-government stuff, follow me on X, Cooper Bogetti, and that's kind of it, guys. Huge interest rates. I would say avoid buying new cars for the next few months to a year. See what happens to the market. Don't be the one that saves this ship from sinking, let it sink and then get into a new car. I know it sounds a little dark to say, but if you can avoid buying a new car, let the dust settle and then buy a new car. I know that's what me and Bronte are trying to do. I've been pushing her back because she wants a new car, and I'm like, listen, things are gonna break. Something's gonna give. Let's just give it some time. So we'll see. Union strike, likely. Government, incentives to buy any vehicle. They already do it for electric cars, but I think we're gonna see it on almost anything. EPA trying to take your car that you currently have if it's not good enough on gas. I think that's something that we'll see happen. But yeah, it's something's going to give. I know some of you guys have probably already seen this, but I'd love to hear from you. So comment down below, email me at cooper.bogetti@gmail.com, or send me a DM somewhere, but I'd love to hear from you guys on this topic because it's highly interesting. So that'll do it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it saucy. I'll see you next time.